I am speaking with Julia Wald, and we're going to talk about her new book, The Suspension of Disbelief. And I will just start in a little bit on the preface. I think that would be a good place to start. I started this project on March 10th, 2020, which is not quite a year, less than a year, and your book's already out. That was the date of my first interview. I was working in the restaurant industry in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. I'll let you take it from there. Maybe just give us like a flavor of how the book came about.
So it actually started as a comic pitch for a magazine that got rejected. The virus wasn't yet, I mean, it was in Seattle, but it wasn't a national, it wasn't, I mean, I'm sure that it already spread nationally, but we were the center of it, and the press was all about how COVID-19 was in Seattle. And the restaurants on Capitol Hill were already, at least the place that I worked, which was Bimbo's Cantina and Cha Cha Lounge, was already not doing very well. We were slow every single night. I mean, that also was probably in part because, old Capitol Hill versus new Capitol Hill and gentrification. So there were other factors, but
Yeah.
I saw an opportunity to talk to my coworkers, other people in the industry about how COVID was affecting them, because it was a weird time. So what was happening was the restaurants were still open at this time, but a lot of the tech companies like Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon had already made their employees start working from home. So we were getting these roving bands of sort of lost tech workers coming into our establishments who suddenly had all this, I don't want to say time off, they were still working, but coming around the neighborhood at night in these large groups, and yet we were still empty, and it was odd, and we were still slow. So everything was shifting really fast, and I thought it was a good time to start documenting what I was seeing, what was happening. But I've never been good at just telling my own story, I guess. I've tried. I think that my strength is probably more in talking to other people and having them fill in some of the gaps. So I wanted to do a sort of interview style. I did have a magazine that was interested, and I had pitched to them before and gotten rejected every single time. And so the first story, Ava, was actually that pitch for that magazine that then got rejected because they told me that they didn't think that comics about COVID and the restaurant industry really were going to go anywhere. It was like a one-trick pony. But
Yep.
I already had scheduled all these other interviews, and I felt kind of like I already talked to all these people, that I owed it to them to continue, just because I didn't get, the project, and I wasn't going to get paid for it. They still shared their stories with me, and I thought it would be disingenuous to not, yeah, continue drawing, start talking to people. And then it became a bigger thing because I realized after the shutdown on March 15th that there were a lot of other people out of work too. And yeah, it suddenly did seem like a viable project, even though I got rejected.
At the beginning of the book, that there's a specificity to the restaurant industry. I mean, the whole book's great. I mean, it's you seamlessly get it all to work beautifully. But I'm just saying that at the beginning, I caught on to that specificity about the restaurant industry. You bring up an interesting term, large restaurant groups. Is that the right term? Or
Yeah.
restaurant food groups or whatever it is?
Well, there's in the restaurant industry, and I am by no means an expert. I want to make that very clear. I actually only worked in the restaurant industry for about 2 years. I have a chemistry background. I was burnt out from corporate work, and I entered it sort of because I was jaded, and I also was starting to get illustration work. I have an art degree as well, and I'm continuing with the art, even though I am back in the lab world right now. My partner, my boyfriend of 11 years, has worked in the restaurant industry through our whole relationship. So I know more about the restaurant industry through my friends and coworkers. I obviously do have some direct experience, but that's also why I wanted to interview other people, because I am by no means an expert. But a lot of people I know and hang out with are. Large restaurant groups are like mini corporations, like if you think of a lot of the names around Seattle, and now they're eluding me, they attach, like a chef attaches their name to a certain restaurant. Normally it's part of a larger corporate group that owns lots of restaurants versus like a small mom and pop small business restaurant that's usually operated by one or two other people. A restaurant group normally has a lot of money behind them, corporate, they have investors, so it's a lot more powerful than small business entities in Seattle. Usually that's also why they can provide their employees with health insurance and other benefits that smaller businesses cannot.
The name of the owner of Lost Lodge eludes me. I think he's an example because he owns a clump of restaurants.
Lost Lake
Lost
is
Lake.
owned by the Seattle Guild, which is the Seattle Guild is about 5 or 6 people, and the man that you're thinking of who caused a lot of controversy with Lost Lake no longer owns Lost Lake, but has bought Mecca. The Seattle Guild is a few different people. One of them also owns Linda's on Capitol Hill, as well as that restaurant next to Elliott Bay, sort of a fancier brunch place that's names is also eluding me. But the Seattle Guild is actually
Oddfellows.
Oddfellows, a great example of a restaurant group. You have a few different people who all have their own respective brands, owners of 5 or 6 sometimes restaurants, and they've all kind of come together to amass this even larger restaurant group.
Well, not to get off on a whole different topic, because that could be you could talk about for a long time, but I do want to mention a couple of points. Tom Douglas is a very interesting creature, because I think of him now as a villain, because he shut down a dozen restaurants. He filed for unemployment, and so he's on my shit list. But
Tavio is somebody who worked there. I didn't put his name in at the time, but I think it's fine now. I've talked to him. He no longer works for Tom. That's why his identity was concealed. But yeah, that's actually when I did that interview, that is exactly the restaurant group. That was one of Tom Douglas's establishments.
But then on the other extreme is my hero, Brian Canlis. I mean, he has gone above and beyond from what I see, because he took his restaurant and adapted to the situation, and he's focusing on deliveries. He even started a whole other entity, which is all about the situation we're living in living in COVID. So
did he write that article for Eater? I know it was a Seattle chef sort of criticizing how the bigger, more famous chefs like David Chang and others have handled the pandemic and not supported their workers as much. I forget who wrote it, but it was very damning. But it was a Seattle-based chef who owned a few restaurants in the city, saying that he's doing all he can to support his employees, and sort of was disappointed in not just Seattle, but we're talking the larger response to restaurant employees in general, especially from wealthier entrepreneurs and chefs who own these establishments.
So once you felt that you had gotten enough information from one particular area, you branched out into different areas. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So that was, again, March 15th happened, and I was still working on this book, and then I was unemployed, and I didn't know it was a book at the time, comics. And I realized I had a lot of free time. I wasn't getting any illustration work either. And if you excuse me, I have to let my cat in. She is making lots of noise.
Well, we're going to, at this, because I'm a terrible editor, I'm going to put some examples. I'm going to put some examples of your illustration work in here too.
Okay.
I was just talking to the audience while you were away. So
March 15th happened, and I was out of work. And I also realized I was at home, and I'm a person who definitely needs projects, uh, illustration projects all the time to feel like I'm doing something. So I put out a call on Facebook and I saying, hey, I have this comic, continuing it. If you're a teacher or in healthcare, or I just listed a wide variety of industries that I was interested in. I would love to talk to you. I'm trying to get it published. It might not get published. We'll see. And I got lots of responses all over the place because I made it shareable. So I got a teacher, Julie, who lives, south of Seattle. I got a healthcare worker, and that's the first time I realized that some healthcare workers were also out of work. I just assumed that every healthcare worker was working way too many hours. So that was really enlightening to learn
Yeah.
that, certain facets of the healthcare industry were actually struggling because COVID was overtaking everything and they were out of jobs or struggling. Um, yeah, I was getting more and more people to interview that way. And then I would put out calls on Instagram stories as well, saying, hey, I'm interested in interviewing sex workers or other people. And that's how more people started coming in and saying, I would like to talk to you, or I have a story. And that was really cool.
I wanted to bring in the whole topic of Studs Terkel, we could talk about that endlessly. And he's quite an icon for that kind of journalism. It became literary journalism. I guess maybe it was already literary journalism by the time he was doing it. But there's a point in the book somewhere where he says, I wonder, he kind of turned the attention on to himself. This guy, Studs, he walks into people's lives and then he walks out of their lives. Do I owe these folks something? And it was an interesting little moment in the book. And I know you didn't do anything exploitive, but if you take an ethics class, a journalism ethics class, you have to consider the person and the vulnerable situation they're in. Were those thoughts running in your mind, how to balance things? Because I think you balanced it all wonderfully, but maybe you could talk
Yeah,
to that.
particularly with Norden, who is homeless. And actually, side note, I've actually been very concerned about him over the last. I haven't seen him over the last month at his spot, and I don't know where he is. I was gonna give him a book. I don't know where he is, so I actually am very freaked out by that right now. But he does sometimes change spots. I probably should ask around a little bit more. But Norden did concern me. I still talked it. Well, haven't seen him in over a month, but when I do see him, I still talk to him quite frequently when I can. But yeah, he's homeless. And he also provided, quite frankly, one of the most fascinating interviews I had done in the entire book. I remember going home right away and typing it all up. And just, there was a lot I didn't use, but probably could have too, honestly. He was just a very interesting person. Yeah, but I do get concerned because there's a whole like notion of profiting off of other people's pain or situations that does concern me. um I don't always know how to remedy that either. If I should give them proceeds from the book, or when the protests happened, some of the protests around Capitol Hill, during the summer, I was selling originals and donating the money to certain organizations because I felt weird about selling originals and profiting off of it. But I also, have to eat. I do have a day job, but I do also want to make this part of a living for myself. And then there's the whole ethics of that, of profiting off of art that's partially based off of somebody else. And I don't really know what the answer is. I actually do struggle with it quite a bit. I don't know if you if you have any suggestions. I would love to hear it.
Oh, I was trying to think. No, you said enough, Julie. You don't feel bad. I mean, it's part of it is what it is in a way, and it's the nature of any interview. Almost it doesn't matter what strata, because the person doing the interview, they could you're almost at the mercy of the person doing the interview. But if you have a level of trust, I think that's the solution. If you have a level of trust, and like you kind of found an interesting way to deal with it in your exterminator interview. You talked about how you showed the interview to folks and they were able to see it for themselves.
Yeah,
That's
I
nice
did.
when that's available.
Yeah,
It's not always possible, but when it's available, yeah.
I think that I'm going to continue with that practice. It felt better to have them have a say, and it was nice. Like, I honestly, I think if I didn't do that, I would have gotten into a lot of trouble with them, because there were certain things that maybe they said and then they realized later on they didn't want to say. Or with Vivian's interview, certain things that she mentioned and then she went, oh, I don't really want that in there. And if I wouldn't have consulted her, um, I honestly think that maybe there would have been a conflict, just because, I would have put something out that she wasn't quite happy with. Other people as well, or phrases. Paul, for instance, the bus driver drives homeless people around, or I guess the appropriate term is houseless. I actually don't know if homeless versus houseless is an issue yet. It seems like people are now saying houseless instead of homeless. I do use homeless in my book, so apologies if that's not a good thing to say anymore. But he had relationships with a lot of these people that didn't have homes, that he was driving around at night. And I think there was some phrasing that he was concerned about that made it sound as if he was annoyed by them or they were a burden. And so, he was like, hey, just so you know, please emphasize, in your book, that I do care about these riders, and it's not as if, I'm afraid of them, or they're a nuisance to me. So it was really eye-opening afterwards to see what edits people wanted to make, or even changes of phrases. Like Biso, who's the graffiti artist, added, words in, like, hey, I don't say this when I talk this way, or this isn't something I would ever use. So this sounds more like me. And that was interesting too, because then they were adding their own voice over mine, but it's their interview. So
Yeah.
that made it, I would say, more authentic to them, and that's a good thing.
I'll just say one last thing about this. I think you could probably not feel obligated to give so much leeway to somebody who's a public figure, or somebody who's on a book tour, who's constantly providing the same answers, more or less.
Mhm.
And then maybe they'll say something revealing or something that's actually newsworthy. And then if they say to you, I didn't really say that, or I don't really want that out, then you might say, well, that's a judgment call. I can't really, I really do that. But it depends, it really
Yeah,
depends.
I guess I never thought of that. I mean, none of the people I interviewed were really, except for maybe Vivian with the Northwest Film Forum, were very public facing. But I do think with her, because she does run a film organization, and she also is their face, she has to be careful about what she says in print, and I do
Yeah.
respect that, because it's not just her that's affected, it's her organization. My next project does involve talking to musicians, though, so I don't know how that will go, or if I should take some of that advice.
Just play it by ear. Play it by ear and have a voice recorder when possible. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah, I need to buy one of those. I didn't have a voice recorder for this project.
oh, well, I'm
Yeah,
impressed.
I was on the phone, um, talking to them and typing at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed.
Well,
Uh,
with Norden, it was writing down everything he said outside.
I'll
So
bring
yeah,
it.
old school,
Very
old
old
school
school.
journalist. Yeah.
That's more old school than Studs Terkel.
Wait, did Stutz Terkel have a recorder?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn it! Yeah, I was writing everything Norden said down while he was talking, like furiously. Like my notes turned into scribbles really quickly. Yeah.
Let me throw out two different topics, and then we might call it a day. So I don't want to wear you out, but maybe we could talk a little bit about push pull, and maybe talk a little bit about the day in the life of an illustrator. Could you tell us a little bit about push pull first? Or?
Yeah, I've been with Push Pull 2.5 years now, I think. Is that right? Yeah. But they have been in existence for 6. You actually might know more than, I think it's 6 years.
At least
Max
6 years, yeah.
is gonna kill me if, if I get that number wrong. But we are a cooperative, an arts cooperative, and we sell independently published comics, underground art, and we also have a free teen art program. So we're half for profit and half 501c3. So all of our teen art stuff is 501c3. Any teenager within the city of Seattle can attend art classes through us for free. We also offer adult classes and outside classes by teaching artists like David Lasky, Max Falls Goodkind. I've taught one class since I've been there, Valerie Niemeyer, and others for a fee. I think it ranges from $20 to $40, depending what the class is. Some are more expensive if they're in installments, like if they're 3 classes in a session. But everything from professional development for artists to making your own book out of cardboard, or paper bags. We really like to emphasize artists from underprivileged groups or who are emerging. So very, very young artists or artists, from, the queer community, etc. I've been working there. I now send out their emails, but I used to actually be in store pre-COVID, selling stuff, planning art shows. Probably not going to have as many art shows this year. We're trying to do more actually in print. We have Push Pull Press, which is again separate from the store and the teen art program, where we're putting out books. So I'm actually helping Max, I think, with a Kickstarter campaign that should be out end of February, beginning of March, for some new books that will be coming out hopefully in 2021.
Well, I'm very impressed with what Push Pull is doing, and I think they have a lot of wonderful classes, online classes. They did an amazing job with Exterminator City. The interviews, the whole online experience they did this year or last year, maybe this year as well, was wonderful. I did take one class, at least one class I've taken with Push Pull. That was David Lasky's coloring class, which was amazing. He did a wonderful job with that. He always does great work. His work is great. His teaching is great. So
David Lasky has been a wonderful just help over the years. He's always been a really good supporter of what I do. He's given me like really good suggestions or advice, critique at times. I'm actually, through Push Pull, it's been really great to get to know him more, and be able to get advice from him. That's been wonderful.
So tell us give us like a little window to your world of being an illustrator. Because I imagine you have like a special way of doing things. Maybe you're more hand-drawn, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, I don't really I use Photoshop on occasion, but well, not on occasion. I actually use it every time I scan things in, but it's more for cleanup. I still do everything by hand. Coloring, inking. I probably should do more coloring digitally, but I'm a Luddite. I'm not very good with computers as much as I should be for my age. I wouldn't say, I guess I could call myself a professional illustrator now. That has a strange ring to it. I still have a day job, but I do editorial illustration work for The Baffler and The New Republic, as well as I am currently working on a project for Current Affairs magazine, if anybody is familiar with that. So I wouldn't say my illustration work is consistent for professional projects. I do get commissions from time to time, and I am getting editorial illustration work more frequently. I also do posters, although obviously this year has been terrible for poster design, which is very unfortunate because those are fun. But with editorial illustration work, if I had any advice for anybody who wants to start it, be persistent, email lots of emails, and make sure that when you email art directors, you are using their professional emails and not their personal emails, i.e., never ever go to an art director's website and email them there. If you want to work with the New Republic, don't go to Lindsay Ballant's personal website. Email her at her professional New Republic email, because they will ignore it at best and might get angry at you at worst. In addition to that, don't expect a response 99% of the time. I think 1 out of every 100 emails I send gets a response. And using programs like Hunter and Rocket Reach will help you get art director emails that are hard to find, like the New York Times or the New Yorker. You can use those to type in an art director's name, search via whatever website you want, and then basically what they do is they guess the best email. It's a lot of detective work. Being an editorial illustrator is actually a lot of detective work before you actually start getting jobs. And in addition to that, even though I've been doing it now for like getting magazines for about 2 years, it's still not consistent enough for me to quit my day job.
Well, thank you for doing that. That's a lot of information that'll be helpful to people that are interested in getting into the biz. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
I know it's not that interesting,
No,
but it helps.
well, it is. It is to me. It is to a lot of people. Uh, Maybe one last question. I don't know how much you could tell us about the Golem, a family history. That's your next
Well,
project.
the comics that upset my dad. Sorry, Dad. He's still, I think, upset with me for those. Yeah, so that project is sort of a curse at this point, because I started it a year before COVID, and I actually got grant money for it through Artist Trust. But then COVID happened, and the COVID comics sort of became everything. So that project's been, I don't want to say on hold indefinitely. It's on my to-do list. Like, I haven't forgotten about it, but I haven't done as much work as I should. And I think what's going to happen is I'm going to overhaul it. When my dad got really upset with me because I kept the comics from him, it made me realize that I probably should have more interviews with my immediate family. Not all of the interviews are accurate, though, because we're talking families. So people have different opinions of what happened, and I have different opinions of my relationship with my grandpa. The one thing I will say is I have a very traumatic family history. I am Jewish on both sides. One side is Russian Jewish, and the other side is German Jewish. Very different experiences, even though both experienced anti-Semitism in Europe. They ran from different things. My mother's side from the Bolsheviks and the Russian Revolution. My father's side, obviously, from the Nazis, although he left before the camps. But I have family that couldn't get out, and I still have relatives with tattoos on their arms. But I am the last of the Walds, me and my sister. There are no other Walds in my line. All my cousins are in their 60s or older. So because of the war, our whole family was pretty much decimated. So it was my last ditch effort to kind of compile what's happened and sort of the family trauma that's still there that I didn't really realize was there based on mental health issues in my family, including with me, and just how it's impacted all of us down the line. And sort of the weird Jewish self-hatred that kind of exists within my own family to an extent. I've sort of witnessed the reemergence of anti-Semitism in my lifetime, and it scared me. And I don't really think there's one area or source to blame, to be honest with you, even though we like to think that it comes from one side or the other. And I think that my family history is a good example of that, considering that they fled from different things. And I think that Jews, to some extent, can be the canaries in the coal mine when it comes to fascism and extremism, because we have experienced a lot of it over millennia. So I sort of had this, and it's an ambitious goal, which I think is why I've sort of kept putting it off, because it's going to be an extremely long project. This isn't going to be like the COVID comics, 1 year or less and it's done. This is going to require extensive research, and work that's intimidating to me. So I'm continuing with it. I have a lot to do, and I have a lot of research to do, and I also have to talk to my family more often about how they feel about things. Because if we talk about ethical journalism, I actually think that in Case the Golem, I was not as ethical as I should have been with my own family. They had things they wanted to say or experiences they wanted to document that I probably should have been more conscious of when I put it together for the first time. But the Golem was literally my first foray into personal comics. So you make lots of mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it all works out the way it needs to work out. Ideally, maybe you could get an advance from a publisher. You just never
Yeah, that
know.
might be, it might be down the road.
Ideally, but
Yeah.
on the strength of this book, you just never know.
Okay.
You,
Well, thank you for being optimistic for me.
well, like you just said, you have to submit and submit and submit. You have to do 100 or more
Yeah, you do.
requests to agents and see who grabs. I mean, do you have an agent now, or are you doing this all by yourself?
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. More advice for freelance illustrators. Don't expect you'll get an illustration agent right off the bat. You know how many times I've been rejected or just don't hear back. No, I manage everything myself. Every single from looking at expenses, which I have to be better about. I really do. I'm not very good with probably because I have a day job as well as this managing your money that you're spending on art supplies and other things, plus sending out emails. You have to be your own marketing person. You have to be your own accountant. And of course, you have to stick to deadlines. So no, I don't have an agent. Also, agents cost money, or they take money from your projects, I should say.
Yeah. Do you think it would help if you made yourself a business, or is that just?
Probably will do that this year. LLC. I actually haven't. Seattle, I think it's a certain amount to register as an LLC. I mean, not. I mean, you have to be making a certain amount sales wise. I think I might finally hit that this year. So my goal this month is actually to get the LLC, small business license. But that usually just means that they want to know how much money you've made every quarter, I think, and then take money out of your sales, which is fine. But haven't had to breed until now do that yet, because I haven't made as much off of art as I think people expect that I have.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add, or?
No, I guess thank you for having me. This is my first interview about the COVID comics, really. So that this is new.
Well, thank you so much. It was a treat.
Yeah, thank you.